Joining us now is a member of the Minnesota Immigrant Rights Action Committee, You Do, who has been on the front lines of the anti-ICE protests in Minneapolis. You, thank you so much for joining us. I have been heartened by folks like you in Minneapolis who, even after Renee Good was shot, right, even after she was shot, who have taken to the streets, who have peacefully protested, who have worked to find ways to protect your neighbors, documented or undocumented, because that is the only way this country moves through this and makes clear to the administration what's acceptable to the American people and the people that live in this country or not. I'm curious what you think about the aggression with which these interactions with ICE agents or CBP sometimes start, because there's usually an escalation, right? But in the video we just saw, with them banging on people's windows and yelling at them, telling them with threats that they're going to break their windows, this seems like they're starting at like 15 out of 10. And I'm curious, the folks that you've talked to, your interactions, the aggression with which they come, it feels like they're not even trying to keep those escalations to a minimum, which is what officers are supposed to be doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And first and foremost, thank you so much for having me this morning. And, you know, it makes me emotional thinking about your question and thinking about what we're seeing on the ground, because, you know, I think I can't underscore enough how chaotic and out of control these agents are. Just the other night, I responded to the shooting that occurred in North Minneapolis, and my top priority was trying to get medical personnel and a doula through to assist someone who was in dire need, who was pregnant, and they wouldn't let anyone through. And we couldn't even get even elected leadership couldn't get them through. And the observers I was working with couldn't get them through. And I think that's just one example on the ground of how inhumane these agents are. I mean, we're seeing people dragged out of cars who are on their way to the doctor. We're seeing pregnant people not getting any medical attention when they did nothing wrong. You know, we're seeing protesters and observers like myself being brutalized with military level tear gas. And these agents are not only inhumane, but they're cruel, their tactics are brutal, and they're most certainly not trained in any type of de-escalation. In fact, I think they're trained in escalation only, from what I've seen. And it's just out of control what we're seeing, and it's incredibly violent, the tactics that they're using, and it's a disgrace to the American people.
I would only add that even if people are doing something wrong, they deserve due process, and they don't deserve knees in their back and being snatched out of cars in the way that they are having. I know you agree with that. It's just like all of this has been shocking over and over. Jonathan.
You do. I want to play some sound from other protesters, or the phrasing we learned from Michelle Norris, constitutional observers. Let's play this, and I'll ask you something on the other side.
I'm protesting the invasion that we have in the city.
We didn't fight wars so we could have this happen in America.
I think he's making war on our state in the same way as Venezuela and Greenland.
Sounds like you don't fit the definition of the...
No, I'm not paid to be here like everybody says. What the is that? I gotta work in the goddamn morning, just like everybody else. I'm just here trying to stand up for community, dude. We're all human beings here. I don't give a who you are, where you came from, what color you are. It doesn't matter. This is wrong.
And you do. I wanted to play that because there's something very. I went to college in Minnesota, so and love Minneapolis, and so seeing what's happening on those streets has been painful for me to watch from here in Washington, but also heartening. And I want to know from you if the reason for my feeling heartened by what I'm seeing is true. It seems as though all of the action that we're seeing on behalf of community members in Minneapolis isn't organized. It is spontaneous. It is from the ground up. People seeing what's happening in their communities and deciding it is not enough to sit at home and watch on television. It is not enough to sit at home and hear the horns honking and the whistles blowing without also getting out on the streets and doing their part to protect their communities. And am I right in viewing what's happening in Minneapolis like that?
Yeah, you know, I think it's so incredibly heartwarming to see the way the community has shown up, despite, it feels like the longest 11 days of our lives in Minnesota. And despite the violence that we have seen, and most certainly, following the murder of Renee Good, people still are showing up. And I think it's because, her name is a simple yet powerful reminder that we are good, and that our intentions are good, and that our people are good. And that, and goodness can still prevail. And we believe that despite everything that's happening. It is, incredibly grassroots, it's incredibly local, the response that we're seeing from folks from all across the spectrum, because I think people understand, I hope viewers at home watching this understand that this fight, certainly for me, is centered on immigrant rights and for us, but it's beyond immigrant rights right now. This fight is beyond us, beyond myself, beyond immigrant rights. It's a fight for our future. It's a fight for our lives. If they're pushing the envelope and pushing people to concede their people power to this authoritarian government, they're just pushing the envelope and testing the grounds on what else they can do in other states across the country, violating anyone's rights who pushes back on the government for anything, despite your politics, despite who you are. So it's a watershed moment for our country and for our movement. And people understand that on the ground in Minnesota, and that's why we're fighting back despite what the violence that they're perpetuating.
You do. Thank you so much for your time and your work.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.